One of the things that I was really excited about was the fact that there were a couple springs in the area. And when I set up, I was so excited to go down and check out the river and look for springs and indicators of springs and seeps. There was one thing that I overlooked that I just took as a base assumption, and that was the dynamic system here. And what I thought was an abandoned floodplain actually may not be. Let's go take a look and see what you think, if my observations are correct on that. And I completely missed this for literally the first 7 days here. A little summary background. The valley is a very wide valley, dissected between sandstones and mudstones, likely the Navajo and the Chinle Formation. My first assumption as I was going down was this bench that you see right here below the pad, I thought was an abandoned floodplain, just based on the creosote and white sage. As I was walking down to the river, however, things changed. So the terrace that the campground is on, I'm walking down from that terrace down to this lower area. And the main trail runs off here. And the side trail follows along the fence down to the water area. So one of the things that I would look for, obviously, is the transition between uplands and wetland riparian zones. So I want to look at vegetation, soil type, and water, if present. And as I was walking down to the river, which is down this way, we will see in a little bit, standard dissected gullies out of alluvial deposits, colluvium and such. There's white sage, there's bunch grasses. I'm not good at grass identification. So I'm now on the terrace below the campground. Still we have white sage, creosote, there's a prickly pear over there. So I'm just tootling along and I'm just noticing a variety of things. And again, on the other bank, I'm looking at the vegetation clusters. For example, some of those dark clusters over there, most of those are large junipers. Not really going to be an indicative source of water. Yeah, we're still in white pane, white sage, grasses. So looking around, a little bit of, I think that's actually moss and not necessarily a cryptobiotic soil, which is really just part of the O horizon. I came down the other day and I realized this is a tamarisk. The nearest water is way over there. And then if we look back, there's another tamarisk. So now we see the embankment potentially over there. And I've dropped it down a bit. Now these tamarisk aren't doing well, which is great because they're an invasive species. They salinify, if that's the right word, the soils around them, and it basically creates an environment, hostile environment, where native plants cannot endure, and they're not really that great of a species. So I saw some tamarisk there. And I kind of thought odd. And I keep going, and we're still dropping down. There's no real evidence of a distinct terrace floodplain. However, there is a little bit of one over here. So this was what I thought was the abandoned floodplain. And maybe it's abandoned now. I would have to go by and do some more research on this area. But I have a feeling that the flash floods that we experienced this week was probably a standard one-year storm, maybe even less. It only got to bank full. So I would imagine that if we were to get a 2, 5, 10, 25-year storm, that this would saturate sufficiently enough so that you would have water of an adequate amount of time, and a wetlands plant that would be 2 of the 3 indicators. Not that this is a whole wetland, it's much more of a riparian zone. Now that we've dropped down, we get tamarisk, and where did I notice it? Again, more tamarisk down here. And I thought I had run into some willows out here as well, up in what I thought was the upper terrace. But I would not discount the second or the upper floodplain as being completely abandoned. I would say that would become very active over time, just based on the lay of the land here. Additional insights that make me think that the upper terrace where the campsite is still probably not safe. It was a 100-year flood, but we'll see. But given the walk down the Paria River, there are hard choke points down there between the bedrocks on either side. So that's not getting eroded out. This, I would imagine, as the water begins to build the hydrologic dam during a flood down there, would back up considerably in this valley and just continually rework the sediment and material. But the flash flood that we had the other day came up to just below bank level right over here. So this would be kind of our initial floodplain in this area. And you can see the rise here. And then second and tertiary, but again, there were some riparian and facultative wet and wetland adjacent plants up in that area. I don't know, thoughts? What do you think? What else did you see on the walk? One of the other things, here's a bit of a summary, was one of the first items that I found, and that was the seep over here. And that took a bit of a hit from that flash flood. But it's stable, and as we can see, it is still seeping water, as seeps shall do. So we're in the desert, but there's a whole seep system over here for water.